All right, we're live. We're live with the Mortgage Podcast, the America's authority on mortgage, housing, and real estate. It's really the genesis. We have our guest Taylor Stork, and just to give you an idea, Taylor, as we get into your background as president of CHLA, I'll give you a little background of Bob's sort of genesis of this podcast. This is really a podcast by CMBs to CMBs, but then into the broader mortgage community who aspire to want to be a CMB and to exhibit maybe a broader industry leadership. In our conversations with industry leaders, there's always this question of like, who's a real authority to speak on mortgage related matters, right? Whether you're, a news reporter or you're an anchor on a Channel 5 News or what have you, and they always want the local mortgage professional on to comment about rates going up or down or specific regulatory or matters that confront housing. And we think that they should call CMBs, right? Because it kind of uniquely prepares individuals to speak on behalf of really important industry associations like yours and the MBA and so on. But by way of their expertise, by way of their profession and their certification and their commitment to the profession. And a real clear way of distinguishing that is those who have committed the time and energy to get their CMB, which is why we're super happy to have you. I actually got my CMB largely because of you and Matt Van Fossen. I had met you.
To say that.
I know. Did you know that? Have I told? Yeah. No. I met you guys at a Lenders One meeting, and there was a roundtable of practitioners, people who are running mortgage companies, and you and Matt just got right into it. There was some appraisal issue, and you guys were talking about Fannie and Freddie. This was a couple years ago, and I even think we had a representative from Ginny at the meeting, and you guys were just politely but grilling this individual, very smartly. You guys were totally on top of your game, and I thought to myself, like, hey, who are these two guys? Number one, and number two,
who are these two jerks?
Yeah. This guy, they're so rude to our guest. And but I was shocked and I, not shocked like I didn't think any better, but to some degree, like out of all the people in the industry, there's only a very few that can really speak to it to the level that people like you and Matt and others can. And I thought to myself, like, what separated them apart? Like, what sets them apart? And one of was CMB, and you guys were wearing your CMB pins. And I was like, number one, who are you? And number two, like, what is a CMB pin? And that's when you guys described the CMB process. So I definitely appreciate it. And I wanted to welcome you, and Bob and I wanted to welcome you to the Mortgage Podcast.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. And thank you very much.
Yeah.
The funny thing is I had to drag Matt kicking and screaming to get his CMB. He didn't want to do it. He didn't want to do the work. He didn't want to take the test. He didn't want to do all the stuff.
Yeah.
And I don't blame him. It's a lot of work. And he's run his own mortgage company for years. So he already just naturally knows a lot of the stuff.
Oh, yeah.
Some of this information, if you've been in the industry for a little while, and if you've been in certain roles, some of the information just kind of becomes second nature to you.
Yeah. When you live,
it's actually a challenge. Yeah, it's actually a challenge. And so so most of the world doesn't know this. I scheduled the test for him and then called him and said, hey, you got to take a test tomorrow. And kind of just nudged him right into it. So
awesome.
I'm glad that was your experience. I'm glad that had an impact on you.
And by the way, if you don't know, I did Matt Van Fossen's oral panel, probably one of the best ones I've ever done. He was extremely prepared, very knowledgeable, and clear that he lives the talk and just doesn't have, a narrative that he likes to share. It was great. And I told him, keep on your path, get into leadership. I'd love to see you as, head of the MBA at one point.
I had him do one of my prep sessions for my panel for the verbal. And he, like my first prep session, I blew right through it. Right. And my second one, Matt was on and he crushed me. So I went from being really confident going into the oral to being like, God, this is, I don't know if I'm really prepared for this just yet. And then I ended up, of course, doing well, but it was almost perfectly timed because I would have been probably ill prepared going into the actual oral if he hadn't really been very direct with me around, calling me out on less than precise sort of BS and more acute answers that was more specific. And then I started tripping over my words, and then he started diving on top of me about the words I was choosing to use. I mean, it was actually a perfect preparation for the oral. But tell us about your journey, through this process. Both, you have a very powerful journey. You've shared it with me a couple of times with your father and some of the commitments to veterans related issues and so on. Like, give us your mortgage journey. And then when did you finally say, like, I want to go from being a mortgage professional to being like a leader in the business?
Yeah.
At what point did you?
I'm still hoping I can do that, Rick.
Well, we are too. That's why we have you on the show, is we're trying to jumpstart.
It's like the goalposts keep on moving, right? So I started in mortgage in the 90s, believe it or not. And I remember when we took 1003s with pens and had to make sure it was the right color ballpoint. And when you had to tell your processor that you had a loan application and the processor needed to go pull a credit report out of the credit report machine. And I've watched this industry go through a lot of changes, and I've watched a lot change. And I've watched a lot stay the same. I was always on the sales and production side. I'm principally a sales guy. And when I was post 2007, 8, 9, I realized that I needed to be, for my career, that I needed to be more than a one-trick pony salesperson. And that I wanted to understand all different aspects of this business. It had always been my goal to obtain advanced education, to go get my master's, to one day become a doctor like Dr. Rick. And knowledge has always been something that has excited me. So I purposefully took jobs in often smaller companies in order to expose myself to different aspects of the business, whether it's the accounting process, secondary marketing process, business processes, to understand the business holistically, not just, hey, I can go get a bunch of loan apps and close a bunch of deals. The CMB thing began accidentally circa 2012, I think, when I went to work for Regina Lowry, and she was the first female chair of the MBA. Oh, wow. She was also one of the original OG CMBs, and very proud of her CMB, and she used to brag about it all the time, and I didn't know what the heck it was.
That was at the time of the master CMB. That was back in the day of
that was back.
That
there's
designation.
Only a handful of masters. Yeah. There's only a few these days. Dana Abernathy is one of them. There's a few around. Yeah. So trying to get that revolved. I would like the revolved, brought back. I want to be a master CMB. So the way this actually happened for me was I was at a Lenders One conference, and Trisha, was then with the MBA and running, I think, member services or something, and trying to convince me that my company should join the MBA. And we weren't MBA members at that point, the company that I was working for. And whoever was sitting there with her talking to me had this pin on. And I was like, well, how much for the pin? I like the pin. And he's like, oh, you can't have this. You have to earn this. And of course, my competitive nature kicked in. I'm like, I can do that. So I joined the MBA and signed up and got signed up for the CMB program and did the executive path and had the 150 basis points and 150 points, and went through the process and jumped right into the CMB kind of testing, class and testing process. Here's where it gets interesting. Sorry, that was the preamble to my CMB story. I was taking the first CMB courses in 2019, and my mom was diagnosed with terminal cancer. And so she was my family's always been, proud of education. My dad had a master's in accounting. And so when my mom was diagnosed, I was going back and forth every Thursday and Friday afternoon on a train from New to Virginia to spend weekends with her. She didn't have long. And so the Friday CMB courses were were a problem because I was on a train. And I got a phone call from Amber at the time, and she was like, "Yeah, you have to be at the calls. If you don't do this, you're getting kicked out of the program." And so I said, "Amber, I can't do this right now. Here's what's going on. I'll do it. I'm going to postpone a year or two. I don't know." So 6 months later, my mom had passed, and I decided I was going to restart this process. And boom, COVID happens, right? But more than COVID happened. So most people don't know this story about me. Rick, you know this story. My retina tore, and I was blind in my right eye for a period of time. And then just as my right eye completed the healing process, and I didn't have the vision back yet, COVID actually went into full gear, into full effect. And then my left retina tore, and I had multiple tears in my left retina. So I actually did my CMB blind, and that's the true story. So I was anywhere between 50% and 100% legally blind during the CMB process. While we were all during the CMB process during COVID, while we were all on work from home and trying to study for a test and prepare to take, to do all the things you have to do when you can't see anything unless you hold your computer up to your eyeballs 2 inches away. Not the easiest process. I completed.
That's incredible.
Well, thank you. It was. I was in a position in my life where I was like, I'm going to be blind for the rest of my life, so I should hurry up and get this designation, because then maybe I can still work somehow in this industry if I can't, do whatever I might have to do. So I was. It was a weird time in my life. Interestingly, it was also just before my father passed. And so this is the second half of the story. So I passed the written, magically, God knows how that happened. And I scheduled for the first oral test I could attend, because orals had been shut down due to COVID because they had previously been in-person interviews, and the society and the NBA had to figure out how they were going to do virtual interviews due to COVID. So we got an email. I got an email on a Tuesday while I was on a train down to see my dad, who was not doing well. My mom had passed, and the email said the first oral panels are going to be on Thursday. And so within seconds, me, half blind, reading my emails by holding my phone up about an inch away from my eyeball, my one working eyeball, I responded to it and told Amber to put me in the very first test available, thinking, let's just go do it. What do I got to lose? I took the oral panel with no prep, other than a couple of conversations. I didn't do practice. I didn't do any of that stuff. I just did it. And I didn't share with my panelists what was going on in my world and why I was in a hotel room in Virginia in the middle of COVID. Right. And I passed, and a couple of days later, my dad passed too. Wow. So it was a really neat experience that just before he passed, I was able to tell him that I'd completed that process.
Taylor, I got to say, I've known you for a couple of years. I've never known that whole story, and the determination and the whatever that has been instilled in you just to continue on that path and to work it through despite all the things you were going through. I mean, I'm not sure you could have had more tossed at you at those times. And believe me, obviously appreciate you seeing that through, earning your CMB, as well as just being the leader that you are today. Because I think we met at a Moorpack dinner I believe it was in DC. Sat next to each other at a table, and it was just like, how do I not know you? How do I not know you? It was like one of those, and very happy. And by the way, Rick, if you don't know this, Taylor's the backstory behind the scenes, but probably one of the first people that suggested about getting a tattoo. Although today, I'm wearing my Open shirt today since the Open is going on now.
He just motivates all kinds of people to do all kinds of things to their bodies. So that's incredible. Now, do you have a tattoo, Taylor, of the CMB, or is that just you telling Bob that he should do it?
No, it was more of just a generic kind of a comment when we were going through the recertification and other stuff. And it was
so. Does this give you lifetime recertification?
Yeah, this was the day that everybody was debating whether or not the CMB process should have a recertify annually, and I'm a huge advocate for that. I think there should be. I think we should all be doing continuing ed personally, but on that call, they said that you have to have participation points, and I just quietly made a little joke about whether if I have a tattoo on my chest at an MBA event or at one of the conferences poolside, and people see me, does that count as points for CMB participation?
I would say yes. But
I love that. So tell me a little bit more about
your mic it's hard to hear you, Rick, with your mic down that far. Sorry.
Tell me a little bit more about the CHLA. A lot of people really don't know about the CHLA. I think a lot of practitioners, loan officers, and people running mortgage companies, it's hard enough to get them to participate in the MBA, let alone to introduce another organization, grassroots organization. So like, what is it? How is it different? Why is there a need for it? Like with all the other associations, that are in place, like give us a little bit of the backdrop of why you thought this is sort of a valuable sort of way to spend your time in the industry and to advocate and be part of the industry.
Yeah, it's a great question. And I can't take credit for it. I wish I could. We started off this conversation and you said that Matt Van Fossen and I helped you become, motivated to become a CMB and a couple of other things you've done. And the truth is Matt is the person that got me involved with the CHLA in the first place. He was on the board and he kind of recruited me into it. So we can give him credit for all that stuff. It is a trade association that when I joined was relatively small. I think we had 10, 12 members. So it was a pretty small group. It was mostly owners of independent mortgage companies that wanted to have an avenue to have specific and direct representation. There are many different trade associations in the mortgage space right this minute. And we have, of course, the MBA, we have HPC, we have Acuma, we have NAMB. We have a lot of large trade associations. As a rule, most of them also serve a very diverse set of interests, right? And when you have a super diverse set of interests, it is difficult to zero in on really specific issues. And so in a lot of ways, the original CHLA was intended to zero in on really specific interests of specific mortgage IMB owners and those companies. Since then, we've when I joined it and we started growing the organization, and then we merged two different trade associations together and it evolved. It's substantially bigger now than it was then, but it's still small and relatively obscure. But with what I'd like to believe is a pretty powerful voice, and continues to grow and expand in terms of our breadth. The organization tends to focus on issues that specifically impact the IMBs, but also the borrowers themselves. And so that's kind of one of the unique aspects of it is there's this concept that it represents the IMBs as well as the consumers that we serve, and we tend to be community-based lenders that work and live where we lend. And we focus on issues that we think are going to promote homeownership. We focus a lot on the first-time homebuyer issues and segments, the low balance issues, and minority lending issues. Those are pretty big. Those are pretty big focuses of the organization from kind of a high level. And the structure of the organization is fundamentally different from other trades, which is to say everything we do is democratic. All of our members have a voice. Everybody who is involved participates to the extent that they want to participate. We don't have siloed out structure. We don't have a structure where a handful of people, get to have a voice or get to participate, and everybody else kind of rides along. It's very, very active. That puts our members in direct contact with the actual policymakers. We talk directly to Treasury and FHFA and CFPB, and it's a really, you have a seat at the table in a very, very big way, and it's a pretty small table, so it's a lot of fun.
I like one of your.
Go ahead, Bob. No, go ahead.
One of the things that I know, Taylor, from hearing you speak in the past and seeing some of your podcasts and other things you've done, we are aligned on the basis of policy, different things. And I've heard you say it a couple of times: housing supersedes politics.
Yeah.
I mean, the family. I know I've cried before talking to, got a tear in my eye when I'm talking to a group of MBA folks at a state association or whatever, talking to the group about how families need, we don't do houses, we do homes. Families live in homes. Homes build communities. Communities are the places that we all want to live, work, pray, and vote. And that's what we're doing. You don't do a transaction, you're building a community, you're building, your history in there. And it's one of those things that I've always appreciated about you, that you give your perspective, and it's always easy to understand where you are. Yet you're not unwilling to take a negative view just to test out the water and understand, are we right where we're going? We've had this discussion before. It's one of those things that, I appreciate you need in institutions, you need in organizations, you need in leadership to understand before we take something to the street, are we right? You can't just blindly lead the marching band down the alley that's, Stork at the end of the, at the end of the alley, leading the marching band into the wall. Animal House reference.
It's a good movie, by the way. It was one of my all-time favorites, right? Yeah, no, I agree with you. And listen, and Rick knows this, and you know this too. Sometimes I can be a little provocative, but oftentimes that is to provoke conversation and discourse, right? And so even within the CHLA organization, I think I do it at large. I like to ask hard questions to make sure we're thinking our way through hard answers.
Right.
Because to your point, it's really easy to follow the guy in front of you and end up in the alleyway, walking into the brick wall, playing the music. But that's not always the best thing to do. And as a child, one of my favorite stories was about the emperor who had this beautiful robe on that everybody said was such a beautiful robe because everybody else thought it was a beautiful robe. And I am a big believer in pointing out, concerns and flaws and thinking, okay, what are the adverse impacts of this idea? What are the unintended consequences that we haven't thought about? When incentives and behavior kick in, how does our behavior change based on the changes that we're proposing right this second? Because you can't look at decisions in a vacuum, and you can't look at decisions based on the information you only have today. You got to think about what the information is going to look like tomorrow, and the information is going to change no matter what.
And as you said, the unintended consequences, because most people will have their position and they'll want to do a change based on their perspective alone and not realize there are many other factors involved. And yes, this may make this a little bit easier for you as a mortgage company, but it's really going to hinder here, or there's a negative impact down the road to a consumer or to a segment of borrowers. And that's the understanding. You need to have that internal vision to understand, are we doing the right thing? Have we thought this through? Because I know in one of my 4 years as a state regulator, we went through the administrative rules. We were up for a rule review. We went through them. We thought we had really worked it out. We got our first industry stakeholder meeting, and they blew us out of the water because they're like, you guys don't understand. You're missing half the effing boat. It's all changed now. We're doing this now. You've got to go look at it this. And it was one of the more awakening points in my career to understand that you need to listen to all perspectives. You need to bring in people that maybe you don't always agree with to understand. And it's always funny in those conversations. You learn a little bit more about their side. You learn a little bit more about your side, where you are strong, where you're not strong, and you end up getting a more of an understanding, and you work together. It's, the challenge of politics. Nobody ever gets everything they want in politics. No, everybody gets it. And it's the hard part when you're representing families and homes and building America, that you have to really try to work as closely as you can to build consensus while getting the best for the family at the same time.
I agree with you. You said something earlier, and I say something similar. I say it a different way. I say that every family needs a home where their kids can sleep safely at night. It doesn't matter whether they're red or blue or white or black or gray or purple. Doesn't matter what politics they believe. Everybody needs a safe place to sleep. And that's what housing is. I think that it supersedes politics. I think that it supersedes policy. And I was raised that way. The other thing I will share with you about my father is that after he retired from the military, 27 years of service, multiple times in combat in foreign wars, he spent the balance of his professional career rehabilitating homeless Vietnam veterans, pulling them off the street, getting them cleaned up, fixed up, put through trade programs, and put back into homes.
Amazing, yeah.
So that is part of my DNA. Is I don't really care what your situation is. You should have a place to sleep.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting because I've when I was at cross country and of course at NFM, we participate in pilots. We work with Fannie and Freddie, and we get invitations to have maybe a broader impact on specific targeted impact zones around the country by MSA. And it just doesn't seem, and there's always the stat, right? There's always the stat of how non-depositories do more minority lending than any other sort of channel of business, despite the lack of explicit or overt CRA requirements for the most part, and it's interesting to me because I often ask myself the question, what is going to be, we're already really, really good at it, like 67% or 66.5% home ownership rate. But there are groups that have lagged substantially. Black, Latino households have lagged. They're in the low 30s, low to mid 30 percentile ranges of eligible home ownership rates. And it's like, how do we provide that targeted kind of assistance that's meaningful, that doesn't get sort of interrupted in the mediums of government bureaucracy and state bureaucracy and then of course company bureaucracy. It's like becomes this, like you have this intended, like policy makers always have a really good explicit intent, right? But then as you kind of go through the machine between the different outlets of how policy gets sort of unveiled or rolled out, it just gets sort of diminished. And the impact becomes a lot less than what the original intent was, right? So what's the workaround? Should this be, should somehow the industry be turned upside down, where maybe it's local investment zones, pockets of investment communities, putting money like little micro GSEs in local markets that are aiming to, inspire homeownership, at local geographic levels? What's the solution? Or is it just, it is what it is, and we're already the world standard to some degree at our size when it comes to home ownership? With what we're doing is working, and it's a matter of not making fundamental changes, but just making maybe smaller tweaks to what we currently have to yield a better result. Yeah.
Well, so sadly, we're not the world leader in home ownership.
Well, I said at scale. Yeah. I'm not comparing like Sweden.
I believe China has a higher percentage of homeowners than America does.
What does?
So Yeah, we're not the leader at scale, and we're not the leader in a percentage, and it's an area where we could do much better, to be honest.
What has a higher rated? Say that again.
China.
Well, China, but a lot of that's government owned. I mean, these are much more. There's a question of private property and private titled ownership, which is
Fair.
if the government owned everything. We could get home ownership to 100%. Of eligible homeowners and force people off the streets and into mandatory shelters and call it home ownership. So I don't know if that's a fair comparison, but go ahead.
So I think we do a pretty good job. And it is the American dream. And we call it that for a reason, because 250 years ago, people were trying to leave other places where they couldn't own land and couldn't own property. And in America, you could own property. That has, of course, evolved tremendously over the last 250 years. And we do have a decent home ownership rate. I would say good. 67%, I think, is pretty good. And a good number of people that are in the remaining 33%, they don't want to be homeowners right this second. There's a number of people that want to rent. They want the flexibility. They want the mobility. And some people just aren't ready to be homeowners. I've always said everybody should have the opportunity to be a homeowner, but that doesn't mean everybody should be a homeowner, right? So, lending, there's a reason that we have lending standards and we underwrite loans. We don't just, everybody's approved kind of structure. There are absolutely areas that we need to do a better job. And the current administration, and frankly, the administration before this one, focused heavily on the $100,000 and below loan amount space. There are structural problems that nobody has figured out how to deal with. So if you follow the Strathmore studies, and the MBA does a really great job of putting out data every single Friday. If you follow the Strathmore study on the cost to originate, the direct variable cost of originating a loan is about $2,500, right? They say it's $12,000 to originate a loan, but the actual direct expense for that one single unit in the IMB space, about $2,500. On $100,000 loans, that's 2.5 points. We barely make enough money to cover the cost just to make the loan. Forget about LO commission, forget about sales and marketing, forget about overhead, forget about, everything else that has to be in place. And that's if it's a $100,000 loan. What happens when it's 75? Now we're talking about 3.5, 4 points to originate a loan. And now we're starting to trip over regulation problems, right? Because we got points and fees tests and we got HTML and we got everything else. So there are structural problems that exist right now that make it difficult for lenders to do the loans that buyers need them to do in the first place, to address the lending needs of those exact communities, Rick, that you're referencing right this minute. Now, fortunately, Section 105 of the Road to Housing Bill put some unique language into the legislation that just passed through. And we're hoping that HUD is able to implement some of those sections of the bill and can help open up some of that lower end market.
Yeah. The sub 100,000 single wide, double wides. Is he talking about manufactured housing? Principally.
So in the Road to Housing, Section 105 explicitly authorizes HUD to do incentives directly to lenders to participate in that lower end lending space, $100,000 loans and below.
Yeah, that's interesting. You got to wonder if it's a matter of just nibbling on the edges of impact. Maybe that's how you have an impact, is you just take sort of one bite at a time, at the apple. It seems like that's the area of the business that most lenders don't want to be in.
They don't.
So that's the reason for the incentive.
Yeah.
But I'm curious how many got into it because of the incentive. I bet you not very much.
Well, there's no incentive yet. It's just passed very, very recently, and nothing's been put into place. But, it's very similar to the VLIP program that Fannie and Freddie rolled out a while ago. I think Fannie has since eliminated it, but Freddie still has it in place. There are structural challenges with doing small loans when the fixed cost of doing a loan is so high, and it doesn't matter whether it's a $500,000 loan or a $50,000 loan. You're still going to have an appraisal. It's going to cost about the same thing.
Yeah.
Yeah,
that's fascinating.
So to answer your question, I don't think there is a magic bullet. I'm not a big fan of magic bullets. They, tends to not work more than one time. I think that each, to your point, it's bites at the apple over and over and over and over, and you got to grind it out and figure out the solutions.
I think financial education's got to be a part of it as well. I don't think kids graduating high school today get the financial education they should have to prepare themselves for what they're going to get unleashed upon them when they turn 18 with cell phones, credit cards, car loans, etc., whatever. And I think we remember when the CFPB was first started, know before you owe. It was all about education was going to be, a third of their mission. And that's kind of gone to the second side. The other part is the affordability side. We need some opportunity to reduce the cost to a builder before they ever put, shovel into the ground, they ever get anything going, so that we can get affordable housing, homes that are built less than $200,000 that aren't, if it's double wides, if it's manufactured, if it's pre-built, if it's whatever it is, so we can make more housing supply out there and allow the people that work in the communities, all the people who work in our community to live in our community and not have people have to bus or drive or take the train in and out just to be able to work at the store or the restaurant or whatever.
Yeah, I agree.
So what's interesting, Taylor, is as one who wants to have an impact on policy. I mean, you run a mortgage company as well, right?
Yeah.
With developers. So,
I actually do loans, believe it or not.
Yeah. Well, I was just going to say, so it's interesting. It's like the perfect example where policy meets practice, right?
Yeah.
How can lenders get more involved? Is it apathy? Do you think lenders are just apathetic, or is it a matter of just like, you kind of get while the getting is good and while it's there, or is there a broader call for lenders to be much more aggressive in their ability to have an impact? What would you say? Do you think that lenders are too apathetic to the broader mission of homeownership? Beyond simply what the vanilla, beyond, because I've had debates with CEOs of banks, depositories, and they'll look at me and say, like, look, I'd rather do airplane loans than mortgages. And it's like, well, no kidding, right? Because those are the cleanest paper. I get it. You want to lend to rich white guys. I get it. That's fine. But the problem is, are you having an impact? If your average credit score in your portfolio is 720, are you having the impact that the GSEs were set up to design to encourage at the grassroots level, at the lender level?
Yeah. So I think that having an impact is going to take on different forms for different people. And for some people, it's closing as many loans as they can. And for others, it is working for first-time home buyers that are struggling to understand it. And for some, it's going to be working with Hispanic or minority buyers who are their entire family is new to the concept of homeownership, maybe their first generation. And for some people, like Bob and like me and like you, it's getting involved with higher level education and certification and kind of trying to spread the good news. I also do a lot of advocacy stuff along the way because I'm passionate about it and I think I know enough to be dangerous. Apathy is a weird word. There are some real issues that we have to recognize. So the large money center banks have largely retreated from the mortgage business. And there are lots of theories on why, whether it's B of A, Chase, or Wells, and then others that followed suit. There are lots of theories on why, but principally, when you look at the way banks make decisions on how they're going to allocate their resources, they're looking at the ROI on their allocation. It's not about whether you can do a better, cheaper loan more profitably than another bank or another lender. It's whether the residential retail lending team is more profitable with that same dollar investment internally than the commercial bankers or than the iBankers or than the guys that finance the private jets that you just mentioned. So within large money center bankers, the competition is for who gets the internal resources to participate. It's different from what we're used to, because you and I both work for monoline businesses. We're one trick ponies. We do mortgages.
Yeah.
So that is one structural issue when it comes to banks versus IMBs. And I don't include community banks and credit unions in that conversation. Those are really conversations about kind of the big TBTF money center.
I just think that a good motivating factor would be like, instead of the cost of funds being the same, like for depositories, it should vary at the window, depending upon what your intended use, what's the intended use of the cash to be for, right? If it's your airplane loans, it's gonna be a little more expensive, right? If it's for mortgages, because there's a broader public good with mortgages, it's gonna be less expensive. I don't think everything should necessarily be created equally. And when you look at, an organization that has multiple lines of business, obviously it's going to go the more frictionless path, right? Operationally, and I get that, but it's annoying to me when there is a public and private partnership, right, between the federal government and private enterprise around.
It's called Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac.
Around achieving sociological goods related to home ownership, right? There's net tangible benefits, right, in the community when people own homes, right? There's not. It'd be a tough argument to be made that the commercial building has the same impact, or the airplane loan has the same impact. Like, mortgages have a really unique, distinct community impact that these other channels of products have, and I just think that I don't know. I mean, but the question is, it's easy to spitball criticisms like as I'm doing, but it's hard to actually formulate that into like a tangible solution that's actually implementable given the structures in place.
I agree with you. Bob?
Now, I was just going to say, I can't disagree with Rick's point. I would like to also address the apathy thing. I believe there's a lot of people who are future leaders out there who don't know they can do it. I know when I was an originator in the late 80s, early 90s, and working my way up, I assumed that the people at the top just knew everything and knew where we're going. And as you move up and you get closer, you realize they're just like you, doing the best that they can. And then you get your little calling into advocacy and leadership. I mean, at some point, something came to you that said, I want to be a CMB. But long before that, you did something that said, triggered in your mind, triggered in your heart, that said, I need to step up and do more. And that's why you became a CMB. You don't get the CMB so you can do something. You get the CMB because of the things you've done and you've earned to date in your career. And I think that's one of the parts that I enjoy of what I get to do for Wiener Brodsky Kiter, is I get to travel the country and talk to other people, other leaders, and help inspire them into the people that they've become and step up and find more. And it's a great opportunity to meet people. If I wasn't able to travel and do conferences, I would have never met Taylor. I mean, I think the first time I met Rick in person was at a conference when I pinned him. So am I wrong?
It's a love story.
No, you were right. That was at the New England Mortgage Banking Conference, and that was great. That was a huge deal, man. I mean, I was in the business. I've been in the business 23, 24 years, and I was kind of like Matt in the sense of like, I had no desire to be a CMB. I thought, why? I have my doctorate. I've been in the business 23 years. Like, what else do I have to prove? Like, what exactly do I need to do? Like, this is like a lower level point of entry thing to do. And I was wrong. Like, I really was wrong, because it was harder than I thought. And it really sharpened the sword, if you will, to better areas of the business that I always shied around because I wasn't necessarily strong in, were areas that like I was forced to really focus on and interview people and understand the granular details of it, because you could skate through, kind of to your point, Bob, you can really skate through the business and you don't really know a lot. You don't really know the difference between wholesale and retail and correspondent. And you see it when people quote statistics, unless they really narrowly define like what they're talking about in the business, they have no clue when they're talking about, cost to close a loan, right? I scream every time I see somebody quote the cost to close a loan. And I'm thinking like, you have no clue what you're talking about. What's factored into that. They're just regurgitating some number.
Yeah.
And so I love that you use that example, Taylor, because it's such a good one. But no, man, I mean, look, I'm a huge admirer of yours. You know that. I've said that to you publicly and privately. I think you're doing a great job. My only criticism of you is you're not loud enough. I'd love to see more of you out there, and hopefully this is your time. You're Moses in the desert, and you're going to come out posting 10 new commandments or something, or from biblical, story.
It's funny that you mentioned that, Rick. I for several months and maybe going on a year, I have been a little bit subdued and less active out in kind of mortgage land, LinkedIn space, and the conference circuit. And there's a number of reasons for that. And I think that every once in a while, it is valuable to take a step back from everything and look around and assess. Bob, to your point, I'm a lifelong learner. Many people don't know this. I'm a matriculated MBA candidate and simultaneously working on a double master's in artificial intelligence. And that's actually taking a lot of my time up also. But I just love to learn, and I take courses wherever I can get them, because I think that this industry, there's so much to know. Yeah. And there's so much.
You need a horse on your farm or something, Taylor. You got too much time in your heads. No, that's fantastic.
100% agree with you. There is so much to know in this industry, and by the time you think you've got half of it down, it changes. Yeah.
And the minute you think you know everything, that's when you're the most wrong.
100%.
I see experts all the time saying things online or in written periodicals, and I scratch my head. I'm like, they don't understand how this actually works.
Well, and I think it's important to respectfully call people out, because there's a lot of people who are noisy, and I could be one of them, like online, and they don't necessarily say all that much, right? Or they just want to say something to be heard, but they're not really moving the dialogue forward. And it's like, I feel like we should really hold, as professionals, one another accountable to that. And if there's a point that's wrong, we should correct it. If there's a point that really doesn't advance a conversation, we should point that out, and we should call each other to do better and to think things through more critically. Because I don't see it. Like, pictures of what you ate at lunch to me isn't moving the conversation forward. So I just think that this kind of thought leadership, I think, is important. But I think the CMB designation is critical, because it's always been in the shadows. And now that I'm a part of the community, I don't know why it's not like on the forefront saying, hey guys, those who don't have the CMB, you're the ones in the shadows. You guys need to be less vocal, because you haven't really demonstrated to the industry and to those who are watching it from the outside in and those who are watching it from the inside out. You haven't demonstrated enough commitment to the business to say that you really care to the degree that those, I think, who commit themselves to the CMB process do.
I agree with you. And I agree with you on holding people accountable. And there are probably a handful of people that are going to watch this and would note that I've reached out to them privately when I saw them say things publicly, and made corrections or asked them where they're getting this information.
You've done that to me. You've done that with me. Yeah.
I don't like to do it online. I'm never going to.
I think about the comments you made to me. I think about that. I haven't had a chance to call out Bob Nemi, but I'm waiting for that moment.
Oh, I'm sure there's plenty of times. Get in the middle of a discussion, you start, it's easy to get messed up in something. So, but appreciate it when people do. Because if I'm saying something or doing something wrong, all of us, we all need the course corrections from time to time.
And that's the learning process. I'd rather be wrong and then have somebody teach me to become corrected, right, so that I can advance myself. I don't want to be wrong about
make
stuff.
Adjustments. I love it. Well, I appreciate you having it on the show, Bob. This was Bob's sort of creation from 6 months ago. What you were going to say something, Bob?
I was just going to make sure that Taylor gave out his contact info, so that if somebody wants to get in contact with him about CHLA or other, that they have that availability.
Taylor.stork@gmail.com. It is literally that simple. I don't think you can forget it. I'm on LinkedIn. I don't look at it that often lately. I probably should, but anybody and everybody can reach me all the time. I'm kind of an open book. I hope. If I'm not, tell me, and I'll try to do better.
Well, love having you on the show, and I appreciate you, man. And very much looking forward to seeing you at conferences in the near future.
Yeah.
And this is a wrap. What's that?
Can I get my tagline in? Just remember, I'm not an attorney. I don't play one on TV, but I will say I work with some of the best of them in the industry. We just do mortgages at WBK.
Yes, you do.
So.
Absolutely. Well, this is a wrap for the Mortgage Podcast. Thank you, guys. Appreciate you. Talk to you soon.
Thank you, guys.